She never imagined a single morning could feel this heavy. The sun was rising outside her window, but inside her chest there was only a quiet, dense ache, the kind that doesn't shout, but lingers like a shadow refusing to leave. She sat at the edge of her bed, staring at her hands as if they carried answers she no longer knew how to reach. Everything around her looked familiar, yet nothing felt like home. And somewhere inside, a small, frightened voice whispered, "I don't know who I am anymore." It wasn't just sadness. It wasn't just exhaustion. It was a slow-building emptiness, the kind that settles quietly, like dust in corners no one ever cleans. Day after day, she watched her dreams drift further away, becoming faint memories instead of living possibilities. She wondered if the universe had forgotten her, or if she had simply lost herself in the noise of life, letting her light dim without even noticing. She walked through her apartment in silence. The rooms looked the same, but she didn't recognize the woman living in them. Once, she had been full of fire, imagination, and hunger for life. Now, all she felt was a trembling uncertainty, a sense that something inside her had cracked in ways she couldn't quite understand. Even the air felt heavy, as if breathing itself had become a task she had to remember how to do. That morning, simple things felt impossible. Holding a cup. Choosing clothes. Listening to the sound of her own heartbeat without wanting to cry. Her thoughts came in fragments, drifting like lost pieces of a puzzle she no longer knew how to assemble. She felt herself fading, not loudly, but quietly, painfully, in a way only she could perceive. And maybe that was what hurt the most. The world kept moving, but she felt stuck in a place no one else could see. She pressed her hands against her chest, trying to hold herself together. The pressure didn't help. It only made her more aware of the heaviness she carried, a weight made not of one big failure, but of 1,000 silent disappointments she had collected over time. She wondered how long she had been pretending to be strong. How long she had been smiling through the exhaustion. How long she had been hiding the truth that she felt completely lost. Outside, life looked normal. Cars passed. People hurried. Birds crossed the sky as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But inside her, a storm raged quietly, the kind that doesn't break things on the outside, but destroys entire landscapes within. She wasn't sure when she had started feeling this way. All she knew was that she was tired, tired in a way sleep couldn't fix. She sat on the floor, knees pulled to her chest, letting the silence wrap around her like a cold blanket. She wasn't crying, she didn't even have tears left. It was a stillness deeper than sadness, a numbness that came from carrying too many battles alone. She felt invisible in her own life, like a background character in a story she once believed she was meant to lead. Everywhere she looked, she saw reminders of the person she used to be, notebooks filled with dreams, photos of happier days, plans she once believed in. Now, they felt like echoes from another lifetime. She wondered if she would ever find her way back to herself, or if she was destined to live within this quiet despair forever. And yet, beneath all that heaviness, somewhere so deep she almost couldn't reach it, there was a soft trembling, a faint pull towards something she couldn't name. It didn't feel like hope, not exactly. It felt like the smallest spark surviving in the ashes, like a whisper she hadn't earned but desperately needed, something is coming. Don't give up. She didn't know it yet, but this moment, this breaking point, was the beginning of everything. Even in the stillness, the universe was rearranging pieces she couldn't see. Even in her silence, life was preparing an awakening she didn't feel ready for. And though she couldn't sense it, something far greater than her pain was already on its way. She tried to keep moving through the morning, but each step felt heavier than the last. It was as if her body carried memories her mind didn't want to revisit, disappointments, broken expectations, promises she made to herself but never fulfilled. She felt like she was walking through the ruins of her own life, searching for something solid to lean on and finding nothing but dust. The silence around her grew louder, pressing against her ribs, reminding her of everything she had lost along the way. There were moments she had fallen before, but this time felt different. This time the fall felt deeper, almost personal, as if life had singled her out for a lesson she never asked to learn. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the eyes staring back, tired, dull, dimmed by the weight of unspoken battles. A part of her wondered if she had somehow failed the universe, or if the universe had finally grown tired of waiting for her to rise. Everywhere she turned, there were reminders of dreams abandoned halfway. Projects she never finished. Goals she let slip. Ideas that once ignited her heart now lay forgotten in notebooks and old files. She felt haunted by the version of herself she had promised to become. The disappointment wasn't just in the world, it was in her own reflection, in the gap between who she was and who she wanted to be. The fear of never changing tightened around her like a rope. What if this was it? What if life had no more surprises for her? What if her story had already reached its peak and everything from here on would be a slow decline? The thought terrified her, but it also numbed her, because she didn't know how to fight anymore. She didn't know how to hope. And yet, in the middle of that emotional storm, she felt a strange urge, the need to reach out, to not carry this moment alone. Maybe, she thought, someone out there feels this too. And if you, watching her story, feel even a small piece of this pain in your chest, she gently invites you to breathe with her. If this resonates, if it touches something inside you, she softly whispers, comment the word rebirth, not as a task, but as a declaration that your story isn't over either. She closes her eyes for a moment, feeling how fragile her heart is, and yet how deeply it longs for healing. And if her journey speaks to you, she hopes you'll stay, that you'll subscribe to the channel, not just to follow a story, but to walk beside someone who is fighting the same invisible battles you fight. Because no soul should walk through darkness so Zinnia. There's a trembling in her voice when she thinks of others who might be carrying the same silent weight. People who smile on the outside but ache on the inside. People who doubt their worth, their future, their purpose. If you know someone like that, even one person, she softly asks you to share this video with them. Sometimes one story can be the lifeline someone didn't know they needed. Didn't know they needed. The heaviness in her chest intensifies as she admits to herself that she is scared, scared of failing again, scared of never finding her way back, scared of being forgotten by the universe. But acknowledging the fear somehow makes it more real, more honest, almost like the first step towards something new. Pain, she realizes, is not just a sign of breaking. Sometimes, it's the beginning of awakening. She sits down once more, letting the emotions wash over her without resisting. For the first time, she allows herself to feel everything, the exhaustion, the grief, the confusion, without pretending to be strong. There is a strange power in truth, even painful truth. And that truth is this: she cannot continue living the same way. Something has to change. Something has to shift. Something has to be reborn. And in that raw, vulnerable moment, she doesn't know yet that the universe is listening. She doesn't know that this deep collapse is opening the door for something extraordinary. All she knows is that she is standing at the edge of herself, unaware that this collapse is also the first whisper of transformation. She tried to push through the day, hoping that keeping herself busy would soften the ache inside her chest, but nothing worked. Every task reminded her of how drained she felt, how disconnected she had become from the world around her. Even the things she once loved, music, books, the gentle routine of morning light, felt distant now, as if they belonged to someone she could no longer access. And as she moved through her home, she felt the same question echoing inside her over and over again: when did I lose myself like this? And you, have you ever felt that way too? She opened an old drawer she had avoided for months, searching for something she didn't have the strength to name. Inside, she found scattered reminders of dreams she once carried with pride, unfinished plans, written goals, little sketches of a future she once believed in. Seeing them now felt like a punch to the chest. They weren't just forgotten ideas, they were pieces of a version of herself she feared she could never return to. Does this awaken something inside you? She remembered the nights she stayed awake imagining everything she wanted to become. Back then, she had so much energy, so much certainty that the universe was guiding her somewhere important. But somewhere along the way, life grew louder, heavier, faster, and she stopped listening to her own soul. She stopped believing that she mattered. She stopped trusting that she had a place in the world. Have you ever carried this kind of weight in your chest? There were days when she didn't want to get out of bed because the world felt too big and she felt too small. She kept telling herself she needed to be strong, needed to keep going, needed to pretend she was fine. But pretending became another burden, one more mask she wore to survive. And slowly, painfully, she realized she had grown tired of performing strength she didn't feel anymore. She looked around her room, noticing how dim the light had become. Not because the sun wasn't shining, but because she no longer let herself feel its warmth. She had closed herself off from the world in tiny ways, skipping calls, avoiding mirrors, turning down invitations, withdrawing from people who loved her, until her life became a quiet echo of what it used to be. She wondered if anyone else knew what it felt like to vanish in slow motion. Her chest tightened as she remembered the promises she once made to herself, to not settle, to honor her dreams, to never abandon her own heart. But here she was, living a life that felt too small for her soul. Each day blurred into the next, and the fire inside her chest, the one she once protected fiercely, had dimmed to almost nothing. She felt like she was betraying her own potential, and that guilt cut deeper than any failure ever could. Sometimes she wished someone would just look at her and say, "I see you. I see your pain." But people only saw what she allowed them to see, the smile, the calm voice, the illusion of control. Inside, she was unraveling quietly, holding herself together with threads that felt thinner every day. She wondered how many others were living like this too, smiling on the outside, breaking on the inside. She leaned against the wall, feeling the weight of months pressing down on her at once. She didn't remember when she stopped believing in herself. She didn't remember when her dreams became too heavy. All she knew was the ache of not recognizing her own reflection anymore, the grief of losing herself while the world kept asking her to keep up, keep smiling, keep pretending everything was fine. In that lonely silence, she realized how disconnected she had become from her own truth. She wasn't just tired, she was drained in a way that sleep couldn't fix. She wasn't just sad, she was grieving the person she used to be. And as that realization settled inside her, she felt the sting of something she had refused to admit: she couldn't keep living like this. And yet, somewhere deep within her, beneath all the exhaustion and despair, there was a small flicker, a soft trembling that refused to die. A tiny reminder that her story wasn't finished. That maybe, just maybe, this darkness was preparing her for something she couldn't see yet. Something that could rewrite everything. The afternoon passed slowly, almost painfully, as she tried to keep herself occupied with little tasks, organizing a shelf, folding clothes, watering a plant she had nearly forgotten. But everything she touched felt like a reminder of how long she had been living on autopilot, drifting through days without presence, without purpose. Each movement carried a quiet ache, the kind that sits behind the ribs and grows heavier when ignored. And she wondered, not for the first time, how life had become something she merely endured instead of something she lived. And you, have you ever felt yourself moving through life without really being alive? She paused by the window, watching people in the street below, laughing, rushing, living. She used to be like that once, carried by a belief that life always held something beautiful just ahead. But now, watching everyone else move so effortlessly, she felt like she was trapped behind a glass wall, disconnected from a world she no longer knew how to enter. A quiet thought tightened her chest. When did joy stop feeling possible? Does that question echo inside you too? She tried to remember the last time she truly felt proud of herself. A moment when she looked in the mirror and saw someone growing, evolving, shining with purpose. The memory wouldn't come. It was as if her mind refused to return to a time when she believed she was capable of more. Instead, all she could feel was the sting of disappointment in the choices she didn't make, the risks she didn't take, the dreams she didn't fight for. Have you ever felt haunted by the version of yourself you wanted to become? Her phone buzzed with messages she didn't open. Invitations she didn't accept. Conversations she didn't have the energy to continue. She wasn't avoiding people because she didn't care, she was avoiding them because she no longer recognized the words she would say. Everything felt forced, shallow, far from the truth she carried inside. She wanted to be understood, but she didn't know how to express a pain she barely understood herself. She walked to her bookshelf, running her fingers over the spines of books she once devoured with excitement. Stories about transformation, courage, faith, new beginnings. Once, they made her believe she was meant for something extraordinary. Now, they felt like distant promises, words that had belonged to a version of her that no longer existed. The distance between who she was and who she is now felt almost unbearable. She sat down slowly, letting herself sink into the quiet of the room. The silence wasn't comforting. It felt like a mirror, reflecting every insecurity she had avoided for years. She felt small, so small that even her dreams frightened her. They felt too big for her current self, too heavy for her tired spirit. And part of her wondered if she had missed her moment, if the glittering doors of opportunity had already closed. Her mind drifted to the people she admired, those who seemed to rise again after every fall, who built beautiful lives out of broken pieces. She envied them, not for their success, but for their resilience. She wondered if something inside her was broken beyond repair, or if she simply didn't know yet where to find her own strength. She wanted to believe in herself again, but belief felt like a language she had forgotten. The room felt colder as the day slowly dimmed into evening. Shadows stretched across the walls, mirroring the dimness she felt within. She didn't cry. The tears had run dry long ago. But there was a heaviness in her eyes, a weight that refused to lift. It was the weight of unspoken fears, the fear of staying stuck, the fear of never healing, the fear of never rising again. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to create a sense of safety where none existed. She needed comfort, direction, clarity, something to anchor her in a world that felt endlessly shifting. Her heart whispered a simple truth she had tried to ignore: she was lost. Not lost because she didn't know where she was going, but lost because she didn't know who she was anymore. And yet, beneath all the darkness, beneath all the sorrow, beneath all the quiet despair, something stirred. A soft tremor, a pulse of life she had almost forgotten. It wasn't hope, not fully. It was more like the first breath after a long silence, a reminder that even in the deepest shadows, something inside her still wanted to rise. Night began to fall, and with it came the kind of silence that exposes every corner of the soul. She sat on the floor beside her bed, the dim light casting soft shadows around her. It was strange how a quiet room could feel so suffocating. She pressed her hands against her chest, trying to understand the emptiness that had settled there. It wasn't sadness alone, it was a mixture of confusion, fatigue, and a grief she couldn't name. And you, have you ever felt a heaviness you couldn't explain? She replayed old memories in her mind, dreams she once spoke with fire in her voice, plans she shared with excitement, moments when she believed without hesitation that life was preparing something extraordinary for her. Now those memories felt like scenes from someone else's life. She couldn't recognize the boldness she once had. She wondered when exactly she had stopped chasing the things that once made her heart race. Does this stir something inside you? She thought of the nights she stayed awake making promises to herself. Promises of change. Promises of courage. Promises of becoming someone she could be proud of. Those promises were still written somewhere, in notes, in journals, in the back of her mind, but they felt unreachable now. She felt like she had failed her past self, the one who believed she would bloom. Have you ever felt like you let yourself down? She tried to distract herself with small tasks, but everything reminded her of the same truth: she was disconnected from her own spirit. Even her reflection in the mirror felt like a stranger, someone who wore her face but not her fire. She avoided looking too long, afraid she wouldn't find anything inside those tired eyes worth saving. She wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, not because she was cold, but because she needed the illusion of being held. She longed for guidance, for a sign, for some whisper of clarity that could make the chaos inside her chest feel less impossible. She wanted someone to tell her she still had time. That she wasn't too late. That she wasn't too broken. She closed her eyes, listening to the faint sounds of the night, a car passing, a distant bark, the hum of the refrigerator, all reminders that life was still moving, even if she wasn't. The world didn't pause for her heartbreak. It didn't slow down for her confusion. And that made her feel even smaller, like she was drifting somewhere between who she used to be and who she couldn't yet become. Her mind traveled to the people she loved. She wondered if they could sense her fading. She wondered if they'd be shocked to know how lonely she felt even standing in a room full of others. Because loneliness wasn't always about being alone, sometimes it was about not feeling understood by anyone, including yourself. She whispered into the quiet room, as if hoping the walls would answer her, "What am I supposed to do now?" The question felt heavy, thick with desperation. She didn't want to stay where she was, but she had no idea how to move forward. It was like being trapped in a maze with no exits, circling the same fears again and again. Her breath trembled as she realized she had been searching for something, not success, not recognition, not perfection, but herself. She missed the woman she used to be. The one who believed in magic. The one who trusted life. The one who dared to dream. She missed her fiercely, painfully, like someone grieving a loved one who was still alive. But beneath all of that grief, there was a fragile whisper, a sensation so subtle she could barely feel it. A trembling urge for change. A soft nudge towards something new. It didn't feel like hope, but it felt like the possibility of hope. As if the universe, in its silent wisdom, was preparing her for the moment everything would begin to shift. She woke up the next morning feeling as though her soul had been scraped raw. There was no sudden clarity, no magic spark, just a deep exhaustion that wrapped around her like fog. She moved slowly through the room, the same heaviness pressing against her chest, but something inside her felt almost restless, as if a quiet shift was beginning to stir beneath the surface. She didn't know why, but she felt drawn toward the drawer she had opened the night before. As she pulled it open again, her eyes landed on something she hadn't noticed, a book that wasn't supposed to be there. It wasn't one she bought, and she didn't remember placing it inside the drawer. Its cover was simple, almost ordinary, but something about it called to her with surprising intensity. She felt a shiver move up her arms, the kind that comes when something meaningful is about to happen. She picked it up slowly, almost reverently. The book wasn't thick, but its weight felt significant, as if it carried more than just printed words. When she opened it, a small note fell into her lap, written in handwriting she didn't recognize, yet somehow felt strangely familiar. The message was short: when the mind forgets its power, the universe finds a way to remind the heart. Her breath caught. It felt like the message was meant for her, meant for this exact moment. She turned the first pages and found herself facing words she had heard before but never truly understood, teachings about energy, intention, alignment, and the magnetic force of thoughts. The law of attraction. She remembered hearing about it years ago, brushing it off as something too magical, too unrealistic for someone as ordinary as her. But now, reading those words in the quiet morning light, something clicked, not in her mind, but in her soul. With each page she turned, she felt like an invisible thread was being pulled tight inside her, a sense of recognition, remembrance, awakening. She had spent so long believing life was happening to her, that she forgot life could also happen through her. And then she reached a chapter that made her heart stop. It spoke about rewriting your life through daily intention, through conscious thoughts, through something called a manifestation journal. Her breath deepened. Those words felt like a doorway, a portal she had been unknowingly searching for. She looked around her room, suddenly aware of how much she needed something to hold on to, something to guide her, something to give structure to the chaos inside her mind. And when she opened the next page, she saw it, instructions for creating a space of clarity and intention. A sacred place for thoughts. A journal manifestation. The moment she read those words, her eyes filled with tears, not of sadness, but of recognition. It felt like the book had been waiting for her, like the universe had placed it in her hands at the exact moment she was ready to receive it. She felt something warm bloom inside her chest, a small, glowing spark she hadn't felt in months. A spark that whispered, "There's still time. You're not lost." She set the book aside gently and looked around until she found an old notebook hidden under a stack of papers. It wasn't beautiful, it wasn't fancy, but it felt right. She opened it, letting its blank pages breathe for the first time in years. Her fingers brushed over the paper, and for the first time in a long while, she felt connected to something, to herself, to her future, to the possibility of change. She picked up a pen with trembling hands. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but from something that felt very much like awakening. She didn't know what she would write. She didn't know where this path would lead. But she knew she needed to start, needed to allow the universe to meet her halfway. She closed her eyes for a moment, whispering a silent request for guidance, for clarity, for courage. When she finally placed the pen on the paper, the first words flowed out effortlessly. "Today, I choose to believe in my light again." And as she wrote those words, she felt a shift, subtle, but unmistakably real. It was the first step toward a life she hadn't even begun to imagine. She woke the next morning with a different kind of heaviness, not the weight of despair, but the unfamiliar gravity of beginning again. Starting over felt fragile, like holding something delicate between her palms. But there was also something new inside her, small but unmistakably alive. Before reaching for her phone, before allowing the world to enter her mind, she reached for her journal manifestation. The simple act felt grounding, almost sacred, as if she were reconnecting with a part of herself she had forgotten existed. She opened the notebook slowly, feeling the texture of the page beneath her fingertips. There was no pressure to be perfect, no fear of writing the wrong thing. She simply wrote what her heart whispered, her desires, her fears, her longing to rediscover her strength. Each sentence felt like a small release, a gentle loosening of the knots she had carried for so long. For the first time in months, she felt present, fully, tenderly present. After writing, she closed her eyes and allowed herself to imagine a version of her life that felt expansive again. It wasn't easy at first, her mind kept returning to old patterns of doubt. But she took a deep breath and tried again, picturing small moments instead of big leaps, the warmth of sunlight on her face, the feeling of waking up with purpose, the quiet joy of believing in herself. She realized that visualizing wasn't about creating perfect images, it was about remembering that a different future was possible. She whispered gentle affirmations into the stillness of the room. They felt unfamiliar, almost strange coming from her lips, but something inside her softened with each repetition. I am worthy. I am becoming. I am opening to life again. Her voice trembled at first, but the more she spoke, the more her words felt like seeds being planted in soil that had long been neglected. She didn't know when they would bloom, but she felt, for the first time, that they could. Later, as she prepared breakfast, she noticed tiny shifts in her awareness. Colors looked a little brighter. Sounds felt a little softer. She wasn't healed, far from it, but she was awakening to herself. And in this quiet awakening, she felt an unexpected wave of gratitude rise within her. Gratitude for the book. Gratitude for the notebook. Gratitude for the chance to begin again, even if she didn't know how the story would unfold. She returned to her journal manifestation at midday, writing a simple sentence that came from somewhere deep within her: Gratideo o milagre que mantem o universo em movimento. As soon as the words touched the page, she felt something inside her open, as if those syllables carried a truth her spirit had been aching to remember. She traced the sentence with her fingers, letting its meaning sink into every corner of her being. That afternoon, she committed to a small ritual of alignment. She placed her journal manifestation beside her bed, lit a single candle, and breathed slowly as she watched the flame dance. She didn't know what she was doing, not in a technical sense, but she understood the intention: creating space for clarity, creating space for herself. She felt a soft warmth moving through her body, gentle but undeniably present. As the day unfolded, she began noticing small moments she used to overlook: the way light filtered through the curtains, the comforting routine of making tea, the quiet ease of being alone without feeling abandoned by life. These moments weren't grand or dramatic. They were simple, but they carried a sweetness she hadn't felt in a long time. It was as if her heart had begun to tune itself back to its own rhythm. That evening, she wrote once more. Not about pain, not about fear, but about possibility. She wrote about wanting to trust again. About wanting to open her heart to the quiet guidance of the universe. About wanting to rebuild herself piece by piece, gently, intentionally. And with each word, she felt the faint glow inside her chest growing a little brighter. Before going to sleep, she placed her hand over her heart and whispered, almost shyly, "Maybe I'm not broken, maybe I'm beginning." The sentence lingered in the air, soft but powerful. She didn't know where this path would take her, but she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, a quiet willingness to try. The next morning felt different in a way she couldn't fully explain. It wasn't that everything had suddenly changed, but the air around her seemed lighter, almost as if life had shifted a few degrees in her favor. She woke up before her alarm, not with anxiety, but with a quiet pull towards something she wasn't able to name yet. When she reached for her journal manifestation, it felt less like an effort and more like a gentle instinct. As she opened the pages, her thoughts flowed more easily than the days before. There was no pressure, no fear of writing the right thing. She simply wrote what she felt: small hopes, scattered emotions, tiny pieces of clarity. For the first time in months, her words didn't feel heavy. They felt honest, real, and surprisingly calm. She realized that these little shifts weren't coincidences, they were beginnings. Later that day, something unexpected happened. Hidden among dozens of old emails she had been avoiding, she found a message she didn't think much of at first, until she opened it. It was a gentle opportunity, something simple but meaningful, the kind of invitation that arrives when the universe wants to remind you that you're still on the radar. She stared at it for a long moment, a soft warmth blooming in her chest, as if life was whispering, "See? I'm still here." While taking a walk in the afternoon, she felt the world around her differently. The colors looked softer, the breeze felt warmer, and even the rhythm of people passing by seemed strangely aligned with her energy. And then, as she crossed the street, a stranger looked at her with a kind smile, not a passing gesture, but a grounding one, as if they sensed something awakening inside her. The timing felt too perfect to be random. When she returned home, she was surprised by how much she wanted to write again. Her journal manifestation pulled her in like a magnet, as if its pages had become a safe place for her soul to land. She wrote about the small signs, the email, the smile, the lightness, the shifting awareness. The more she wrote, the clearer it became: the universe wasn't ignoring her, she had simply forgotten how to listen. She sat by the window as the late afternoon sun filtered through the curtains, painting the room in warm gold. Something inside her softened. She felt the presence of a quiet intuition, guiding her toward trust, not trust born from certainty, but from surrender. She whispered gently into the stillness, "If this is the beginning of something, I'm open." Later that evening, she returned to the mysterious book. Opening it at random, her eyes landed on a line that sent chills through her body. "When you shift your internal world, the external world has no choice but to shift with you." She closed her eyes, letting the truth of those words settle deep inside her. It felt like confirmation, the universe speaking in a language her heart was finally able to understand. She caught her reflection in the dark glass of the window. Her face hadn't changed, but her eyes had. There was a softness in them, a glow that hadn't been there for a long time. She touched the cold glass lightly, almost reverently, as if acknowledging the version of herself she was slowly becoming. She didn't feel lost in that moment, she felt in transition. A small smile found its way onto her lips, shy, gentle, but real. She whispered a promise to herself, "I'll trust the small signs, even the quiet ones." And in that whisper, she felt something align within her, like a key turning slowly inside a long-locked door. And if this part of her journey stirred something inside your own heart, she invites you to breathe, feel, and softly declare the same words she did when she recognized her first signs of alignment: "I receive." The next few days felt strangely alive, as if something in the air had begun to pulse with possibility. She wasn't entirely sure what had shifted, but she could feel the difference in her bones, a soft, steady hum of alignment that hadn't existed before. Her mornings didn't feel like battles anymore. They felt like invitations. She woke up with a subtle clarity, a quiet knowing that she was no longer walking through life completely blind. Something was guiding her, even if she couldn't yet explain what it was. She noticed the changes in small, almost delicate ways. Her thoughts weren't as loud or chaotic. The heaviness she used to carry in her chest began to lift in slow, almost imperceptible layers. She found herself pausing more often, to breathe, to feel, to exist without rushing. Her journal manifestation had become her anchor. Each word she wrote strengthened the sense that her inner world was reconnecting to something larger, something meaningful. One morning, while preparing breakfast, she received an unexpected message, an invitation from someone she admired, someone she thought had forgotten she existed. It wasn't a grand proposal or a life-changing offer, but it was something real. Something that made her heart skip in disbelief. She stared at the screen, feeling the weight of recognition. Life wasn't just nudging her anymore, it was beginning to open doors. Later that afternoon, as she walked through the city, she felt a strange synchronicity unfold around her. She kept noticing repeating numbers, on clocks, receipts, signs, the kind of patterns people often dismissed as coincidence. But she didn't dismiss them. Not now. They felt like the universe whispering, "You're on the right path. Keep going." And for the first time in months, she believed it. Her energy began attracting people she hadn't spoken to in a long time. A friend she hadn't heard from reached out unexpectedly. A coworker complimented her in a way that felt sincere and almost reflective, as if they sensed a glow returning to her. Even strangers seemed drawn to her presence, offering smiles or small conversations that felt perfectly timed. She felt like she was being pulled back into the rhythm of life. In the evenings, she revisited her journal manifestation with a deeper sense of purpose. What started as hesitant scribbles now flowed into intentional affirmations and heartfelt visions. She no longer wrote because she was desperate for change, she wrote because she could feel change happening inside her. The pages became a mirror, showing her the version of herself she was stepping into. As the days passed, her emotions began to soften. She found herself laughing lightly at small things, noticing beauty in places she had ignored, feeling gratitude rise naturally like sunlight returning to a long-abandoned room. Her spirit, once cracked and dim, was mending quietly. She felt it in the way her shoulders relaxed, in the way her eyes lifted, in the way her voice steadied. One evening, while journaling by candlelight, she wrote a sentence she never expected to write again: "I feel hopeful." The pen lingered on the paper after she finished, and tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the realization that hope had not died in her, it had simply been waiting for her to make space for it again. Small opportunities started appearing in ways that felt perfectly aligned. A message here. A compliment there. A creative idea that tugged at her heart. A sense of guidance that felt almost intuitive. It was as if the universe was rearranging itself to meet her halfway, reflecting her shift back to her own inner power. And as she lay in bed that night, she couldn't ignore the truth anymore: something real was happening. Not imagined, not forced, not wished into existence, real. Her life was beginning to move again. And for the first time in a long time, she felt a quiet excitement blooming in her chest, whispering that this transformation was only the beginning. Days continued to unfold with a rhythm she hadn't felt in a very long time, steady, encouraging, almost divinely guided. She found herself waking up with a sense of gentle anticipation, as if life were slowly revealing pieces of a puzzle she didn't even know she was solving. Her mornings no longer felt heavy. Instead, they carried a softness, a quiet promise that something new was taking shape within her. And deep down, she could feel it: she was not the same woman she had been even a week ago. At work, people began to notice her in ways they hadn't before. Not because she was trying to be noticed, but because her presence was changing. She spoke with more clarity, listened with more intention, and carried herself with a calm confidence that felt foreign yet entirely natural. For the first time in months, she felt connected to her own voice, grounded, steady, aligned. And that alignment radiated outward like a subtle, undeniable glow. One afternoon, her supervisor approached her unexpectedly with praise, genuine praise. They told her she had a spark, an intuition for solving problems, a way of seeing things that others often missed. Words she thought she'd never hear again. Compliments she once believed she no longer deserved. She felt warmth blossom through her chest, surprised by how deeply those words soothed a part of her she didn't realize was starving. Outside of work, the invitations began. A friend asked her to join a small creative project. Another invited her to an event she would have declined before. And a third told her they'd felt inspired by her recent energy, that she seemed different, lighter, more open. She wasn't trying to impress anyone, she was simply becoming herself again. And people could feel the shift. She noticed ideas coming to her at random moments, in the shower, on walks, while journaling. Ideas that felt alive, electric, meaningful. She wrote them all in her journal manifestation, trusting that even the smallest spark had purpose. Her creativity, which had been silent for so long, was waking up with force. It was as if her soul had been patiently waiting for this exact moment to speak again. Some nights, she would sit by the window with her journal manifestation open on her lap, reading the words she'd written over the past days. She was amazed by the difference. The woman who wrote the earlier pages was lost, exhausted, barely holding on. The woman writing now was rising. Slowly, imperfectly, beautifully. And in one of those quiet moments, she whispered to herself, almost in disbelief, "Today I choose to believe." Those 5 words became a kind of mantra, echoing in her mind whenever doubt tried to creep back in. In the morning. During stressful moments. When opportunities came. When fears rose. Today I choose to believe. Belief wasn't a guarantee, it was a decision. A choice she made again and again, and each time, the universe seemed to respond with something new. Her intuition sharpened with every passing day. She began sensing when something felt aligned and when it didn't. She trusted her instincts more. She trusted life more. And slowly, she started trusting herself, something she thought she had lost the ability to do. She realized that believing in herself wasn't about feeling ready, it was about choosing to rise even when she wasn't. People around her continued to gravitate toward her energy. They asked for her advice, her presence, her perspective. Not because she had everything figured out, but because she had rediscovered a quiet authenticity, a softness, a strength that came from within. It made her magnetic in a way she had never been before, not even in her brightest days. And as she went to bed one night, she placed her hand over her heart and felt the steady beating beneath her palm, strong, resilient, alive. She smiled softly, realizing that the transformation wasn't just happening around her, it was happening within her. She was becoming someone she once dreamed of being. Someone aligned. Someone open. Someone deeply, undeniably alive. The progress she felt wasn't loud or dramatic, it was quiet, like the steady unfolding of dawn. Each day brought new clarity, gentle realizations that had been buried under months of exhaustion. She began noticing the way her thoughts flowed more easily, how her mind no longer spiraled into the dark places it once lived. There was a softness within her now, a patience she had never known she possessed. And somehow, this gentle pacing made every small victory feel monumental. She started speaking to herself with kindness, something she had never truly practiced before. When she made mistakes, she didn't collapse into self-criticism. When fear rose, she acknowledged it without letting it define her. When uncertainty returned, she whispered her grounding mantra again, "Today I choose to believe." And each time she said it, she felt her spirit stand a little taller, as though those words were stitching her back together from the inside. Her journal manifestation became more than a notebook, it became a sanctuary. A sacred space where she could express her fears without shame, her dreams without limitation, her hopes without apology. Some pages were filled with affirmations, others with visions of the life she wanted to create. And as she read her own words, she realized she wasn't just recording her life, she was shaping it. With intention. With awareness. With courage. The universe continued sending signs, small, delicate, perfectly timed reminders that she was aligned with something greater. A song played in a cafe with lyrics she needed to hear. A quote appeared online that matched her exact emotion of the moment. Conversations with strangers carried messages she didn't know she needed. Nothing felt random anymore. Everything felt connected, as if life itself was guiding her gently by the hand. She noticed a shift in how people responded to her. They spoke to her with more respect, more interest, more warmth. Some said she seemed lighter, others said she seemed different, but none of them could name what had changed. Only she knew. Her energy, once fragmented, was finally coming back together. She no longer hid herself. She no longer shrank for others' comfort. She was stepping into her presence, quietly but unmistakably. Her creativity blossomed in unexpected ways. Ideas arrived at surprising hours, while she cooked, showered, walked, dreamed. Ideas for projects, for opportunities, for new chapters she hadn't dared to imagine before. She wrote them all down, trusting that even the smallest spark had a place in her future. Her mind, once clouded with doubt, now felt like fertile ground. Every thought became a seed. Every desire, a whisper of possibility. Moments of doubt still came, but they no longer controlled her. When they appeared, she breathed deeply and placed her hand over her heart. She reminded herself that healing wasn't linear, that becoming wasn't instantaneous. And in those tender moments, she repeated her mantra softly, "Today I choose to believe." The doubt didn't disappear immediately, but it loosened. It softened. It lost its power over her. People she once admired from a distance began to notice her work, her presence, her energy. Messages came unexpectedly, kind words, encouragement, invitations. She wasn't chasing validation, it simply found her. And in those moments, she felt a deep sense of alignment, as if the universe was echoing back the energy she had been cultivating within. She began to see her own transformation in real time, not just in achievements, but in how she carried herself through the world. She stood taller, spoke clearer, loved deeper, dreamed louder. She realized she wasn't becoming someone new, she was returning to the person she was always meant to be. And as one day came to an end, she closed her journal manifestation with a soft smile. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything finally felt possible. For the first time in a very long time, she wasn't afraid of the future. She was ready for it. Fully. Completely. Beautifully. Her life began to stretch in ways she hadn't expected, not abruptly, not in overwhelming waves, but in a steady unfolding that felt both gentle and powerful. The more she aligned her inner world, the more her outer world responded. Opportunities didn't just appear, they aligned. People didn't just enter her life, they connected. And she realized that the shift she was experiencing wasn't luck, it was resonance. Her energy was finally matching the life she was meant to live. Her work started to reflect her transformation. Tasks that once drained her now felt manageable, even meaningful. Her creativity flourished naturally, without force, like a river finding its way after a long drought. Ideas she once abandoned returned with new strength, asking to be seen again. She felt inspired in ways she hadn't felt in years. Even mundane responsibilities carried a new sense of purpose, as if life itself had regained color and depth. Her confidence grew quietly but undeniably. She found herself taking steps she would have been too afraid to take months ago, speaking up in meetings, offering new ideas, expressing her truth with clarity. She no longer second-guessed every word she said. She trusted her intuition, trusted her voice, trusted that life was expanding for her, not against her. For the first time, she felt like she belonged inside her own life. Her relationships also began to shift. People she once struggled to connect with suddenly felt easier to understand. Conversations flowed more naturally. She attracted kindness, understanding, and emotional connection in ways that felt healing. It wasn't because the world had changed, it was because she had. The moment she softened within, the world softened around her. New people began appearing, too, individuals who shared her values, her dreams, her energy. These weren't random encounters. They were aligned connections, the kind that feel like puzzle pieces falling into place. Some brought inspiration. Some brought guidance. Some brought clarity. But all of them brought expansion. It was as if the universe was curating the people she needed for this next chapter. Financially, things began to move as well. Small opportunities turned into larger ones. Delayed payments finally arrived. Unexpected sources of abundance appeared at precisely the right moments. She started feeling supported, not just spiritually, but practically. The anxiety she once carried about money began to loosen, and she realized abundance wasn't just about numbers, it was about energy, faith, and openness. Her health followed the transformation. She slept better. Breathed deeper. Woke up feeling lighter. Her body responded to the peace she was cultivating, releasing tension she didn't realize she had been holding for years. Even her posture changed, her shoulders lifted, her steps softened, her presence grounded. Her body was healing because her spirit was healing. The more she aligned with gratitude, the more the universe gave her reasons to be grateful. Every night, she returned to her journal manifestation, writing not from desperation, but from expansion. Her entries shifted from pain to possibility, from fear to faith, from sorrow to abundance. The journal had become her mirror, one that reflected not what she had been, but what she was becoming. As she looked around her life, she began to understand something profound: expansion doesn't happen in a single moment. It happens in the accumulation of tiny shifts, quiet decisions, whispered affirmations, and daily alignment. Expansion happens when the inner world is ready to receive. And after everything she had survived, Everything she had healed, everything she had faced, she was finally ready. And as another day came to a close, she felt a truth settle gently into her chest. This wasn't the peak of her transformation. This was the beginning of the part of her story where the universe starts saying, "Now watch what I can do through you." Her expansion didn't just continue, it intensified. Every day felt like another layer of her old self was gently peeling away, revealing a woman she had only glimpsed in dreams. The inner work she had committed to was no longer just shifting her emotions, it was reshaping her reality. She felt the change in her voice, in her choices, in her energy. The world responded to her not because she had become someone new, but because she was finally allowing herself to be who she truly was. Her career began evolving in ways she never expected. New responsibilities found her. Projects that once felt intimidating now felt exciting. Her creativity took on a life of its own, weaving ideas into opportunities with ease. People began turning to her for guidance, inspiration, leadership, roles she once believed she wasn't ready for. And yet, as she stepped into them, she realized she had been preparing for this all along, even in the darkest chapters. Abundance flowed not in sudden waves, but in steady streams. Financial worries that once consumed her began to soften, replaced by a sense of trust, trust that she was supported, trust that she was guided, trust that the universe was not withholding anything from her. Unexpected income arrived. Opportunities multiplied. And with each blessing, she felt her relationship with abundance healing, deepening, transforming. Her emotional world expanded too. She found herself capable of loving more deeply, herself and others. She forgave parts of her past that once felt impossible to release. She nurtured relationships that brought peace and let go of the ones that dimmed her. And in that process, she discovered that healing wasn't about forgetting the wounds, it was about remembering her worth. Spiritually, she felt more connected than she had ever been. Signs appeared everywhere, not because she was searching for them, but because she was aligned enough to see them. Feathers on the ground. Songs with perfect timing. Numbers repeating like soft whispers from the universe. Intuitions that proved true. She no longer needed proof, she trusted the guidance. She trusted the path. She trusted herself. Her journal manifestation became the sacred transcript of her evolution. Every page held evidence of her becoming, pages filled with gratitude, with visions, with affirmations, with quiet revelations. Sometimes she flipped back through older entries and felt tears rise in her eyes. Not tears of sadness, but of awe. Awe at how far she had come. Awe at how deeply she had transformed. Awe at how the universe had met her the moment she began meeting herself. She started dreaming again, not daydreaming, but believing in the dreams. Dreams that once felt too big now felt like natural extensions of her soul. She wrote them boldly, clearly, without hesitation. Dreams for her future. Dreams for her purpose. Dreams for her legacy. Each word flowed with a confidence she never knew she could hold. Her relationships mirrored her transformation. People admired her glow, her peace, her softness, her strength. Some even said her presence felt healing. And for the first time, she allowed those words to settle in her heart instead of deflecting them. She realized she had become someone who carried light, not because life had been easy, but because she had learned to rise through every storm. The universe continued opening paths she hadn't imagined. Invitations arrived. Recognition came. Support appeared at the perfect moments. She began saying yes more often, not out of fear of missing out, but out of trust that what reached her was meant for her. Each yes felt like another door opening. Each door felt like another chapter unfolding. And as she closed her eyes one night, her journal manifestation resting against her heart, she felt a wave of gratitude wash through her, overwhelming, powerful, sacred. She whispered into the darkness, not as a wish, but as a knowing, life is finally matching the woman I am becoming. And in that moment, she felt the truth settle deep in her chest. Her expansion had only just begun. Her transformation was no longer something only she could feel, it became something the world could see. People began noticing her presence in ways that felt both surprising and deeply affirming. Strangers complimented her energy. Colleagues admired her confidence. Friends said she seemed brighter, more grounded, more alive. It was as if her inner light, once dimmed by months of uncertainty, was now overflowing into every space she entered. Her work began attracting attention from unexpected places. People she respected reached out with encouragement. A project she had poured her heart into was highlighted publicly for its creativity and impact. Her ideas, once overlooked, were now celebrated. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen, not for who she pretended to be, but for who she truly was becoming. Invitations followed, arriving gently but consistently. Events. Collaborations. Conversations with people who inspired her. Each one felt like another door opening, not because she was chasing success, but because success was naturally aligning with her energy. She was finally living in harmony with her purpose, and the world responded with opportunities that felt like extensions of that purpose. Even her personal life began glowing with recognition. Loved ones told her how proud they were. People who once underestimated her began treating her with newfound respect. She didn't need validation to feel worthy, but the recognition felt like a reflection of her growth, as though life was whispering, "I told you. You were always meant for more." One afternoon, she received a message that made her pause. It said, "Your journey has inspired me more than you know." She read it again, feeling a swell of emotion rise in her chest. She had never imagined that her healing, her quiet, solitary, messy healing, could reach someone else. But it had. And in that moment, she understood something profound: when one soul rises, others rise with it. She continued writing in her journal manifestation every day, capturing every shift, every blessing, every aligned moment. The journal had become a map of her awakening, a testament to what happens when someone refuses to give up on themselves. She often traced her fingers over older entries, feeling gratitude for the woman she once was, the one who broke, the one who survived, the one who chose to rise anyway. As she moved through her days, she felt an awareness blooming inside her, a recognition that she wasn't just receiving from life, she was contributing to it. Her words, her presence, her energy, they were touching others in ways she never expected. She realized she had become a mirror for anyone who had felt lost and was trying to find their way back home to themselves. Her story was no longer just her own. It had become a bridge, a reminder that healing is possible, that transformation is real, that darkness is not the end but the beginning of awakening. She felt humbled by it, guided by it, strengthened by it. Everything she had endured now felt like preparation for everything she was stepping into. And if someone watching her journey felt a spark, even the smallest one, she hoped they would follow it. If her story stirred something in another heart, she hoped they would allow themselves to believe, even if just a little, that change was possible. With a soft, gentle voice, she wanted to whisper, "If this touched you, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your heart." And if they felt called, she invited them, tenderly, to continue walking with her by subscribing, not out of pressure, but out of connection. Because as she looked at the woman she had become, she understood something beautiful: no transformation is meant to be walked alone. And the more hearts join the journey, the more powerful the healing becomes. As her journey reached this point of quiet brilliance, she realized something she never expected: the universe had never abandoned her. It had been waiting, patiently, faithfully, for the moment she decided to return to herself. Every struggle, every tear, every moment of doubt had been a bridge leading her here. She placed her hand over her heart and felt an overwhelming rush of gratitude, deep and holy, washing through her like warm light. Her transformation wasn't accidental. It was divine timing. She looked at her reflection one last time, not the reflection of the woman who once felt lost and broken, but the reflection of someone reborn. Her eyes carried strength. Her voice carried clarity. Her energy carried truth. She had walked through darkness, faced her deepest shadows, and emerged with a spirit more luminous than she ever imagined possible. And standing there, she whispered softly to herself, "I made it back to me." Her journal manifestation lay open on her desk, the pages fluttering gently in the evening breeze. She ran her fingers across them, feeling the weight of every word she had poured into those pages. This journal wasn't just paper, it was her rebirth captured line by line. A portal. A mirror. A map of who she became. She realized that the power that rebuilt her life wasn't outside of her, it lived within her all along. She had simply remembered how to use it. She sat down and wrote one final entry, not a wish, not a fear, not even a dream, but a declaration. "I am living proof that when a heart chooses to rise, the universe rises with it." The moment the ink touched the page, something inside her settled with profound peace. She was no longer searching. She was arriving. As the room filled with the warm glow of night, she felt a deep knowing settle in her chest. The same power that transformed her life existed in every person who crossed her path. No one was too broken. No one was too late. No one was too lost. Healing didn't begin with perfection, it began with willingness. And she hoped that anyone hearing her story would feel that truth in their soul. So she turned to the viewer, to the soul listening, watching, feeling every step of her transformation. With a gentle voice, she whispered, "If this awakens something inside you, share one word in the comments that describes how your heart feels right now. Not for her, but for you, so your journey can take its first breath." She smiled softly and continued, her voice warm and sincere. If her story touched your spirit, if it brought you clarity or hope, she invites you to subscribe. Not as an obligation, but as a way to stay connected to a journey that mirrors your own, a reminder that you are not walking this path alone. And with the tenderness of someone who has lived through transformation, she added, "If you know someone who is hurting, someone who is searching for themselves in the dark, share this video with them." Sometimes, one story is all it takes to reopen a heart. Finally, with tears she didn't hide and gratitude she didn't try to contain, she whispered the last invitation. "Before you leave, leave one small gesture of gratitude in the comments. A heart. A word. A symbol. A prayer. Let the universe see your openness. Because gratitude opens doors that effort alone never could." And as the video faded into soft light, the message lingered in the air. Powerful, tender, unforgettable. Your story isn't over. The universe is not done with you. Your next chapter begins the moment you choose to believe.